Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Institute of Politics Speaker Series event, Is It Still the Economy, Stupid? 4 Decades of Democratic Strategizing. My name is Luca Navarro. I'm a second year at the college from San Diego, California, studying political science and economics. I'm a columnist for The Gate, the IOP's undergraduate political review, and last summer, through the IOP's summer internship program, I interned at Precision Strategies, where I got a closer look at the intersection of media, messaging, and political strategy. So I'm really looking forward to tonight's conversation and honored to be introducing these 3 guests. Today's conversation features 2 of the most influential Democratic strategists of the last few decades, James Carville and Lis Smith, as they discuss campaign strategy, media, bipartisanship, and behind-the-scenes insights from the 2024 election and beyond. James Carville is one of the most renowned political strategists in American history, best known for managing Bill Clinton's 1992 presidential campaign and helping craft the iconic message, "It's the economy, stupid." He's also well known for his bipartisan marriage to fellow political consultant Mary Madeline. He's the co-host of the Politics War Room podcast and the subject of the recent documentary, Carville, Winning is Everything Stupid, which we will be watching some clips from tonight. If you haven't seen it yet, you can stream the documentary on Max. Lis Smith is a veteran of over 20 political campaigns with deep experience in media strategy, public affairs, and crisis communications. She recently served as senior advisor to Pete Buttigieg's 2020 presidential campaign and is the author of Any Given Tuesday, a memoir about her career in politics. Moderating today's discussion is David Axelrod, senior political commentator for CNN, former senior advisor to President Obama, and the founding director of the Institute of Politics. Some quick housekeeping before we begin. First, please silence your cell phones. Second, when it is time for Q&A, a microphone will be placed in the audience. Please line up and remember that priority for first questions will be given to students. Finally, please be sure to check out future IOP events, including Is RFK Jr. Right About Our Food System?, which will take place on Tuesday, April 8th at 5:30 p.m. here in Bond Chapel, and The Ugly Politics of Natural Disasters, from Hurricane Katrina to the LA fires, which will take place on Tuesday, April 15th at 5:30 p.m. in Idaho. Now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming to the stage James Carville, Lis Smith, and David Axelrod.
I want to tell you guys that Liz, years before you were born, and James, years before you became famous, another great thing happened here, which is I got married in this chapel.
Oh!
And that worked out really well, so there's good juju around this whole deal here. But I don't really need it, because I've got you guys. Perhaps the greatest political strategist of our time, and someone who I think they may be saying that about her someday in the not-too-distant future, one of the great young strategists in the Democratic Party. But we're going to try and go through, we're going to do a couple of things. I want you to be exposed to some of this great documentary about James, which, if you haven't seen it, you should see the whole thing, because he's quite a character, and it's a great story, and there are things to be learned from it. Secondly, there's a lot going on right now, and so we want to cover some of that as well. So let me begin. James, I want to set up the first clip I want to show, and it's about your early career, but you were born in Carville, Louisiana, which I appreciate, because I'm from Axelrod, New York. So, but which was named for your grandfather, right?
That's correct.
Who was the postmaster. Right. And you went to LSU.
Right.
You bombed out of LSU.
I did.
Retreated to the Marines.
Correct.
Came back, became a lawyer, and then you started hanging with another legendary consultant, Ray Strother, down in Louisiana. But you didn't, tell me about, you didn't actually win your first race until you were 42 years old.
That's correct. Well, thank you, David. First of all, anytime I spend time with David, I always learn something. We're friends, we go back but longer than I like to remember it. Liz is correct, is one of the brightest young consultants in the body, does a lot of work, wrote a terrific book, I've had on the podcast. She's a very She's not up and coming. She's already here. She's here. She's here. So first of all, I'm glad to be here. I love college. Best 4 years of my life were spent as a sophomore at LSU. I had a 4.0 on graduation day. It was my blood alcohol level. So David, the story of Carville, you'll see it in the film. It was actually named, my great-grandmother was the postmistress. My grandfather was a postmaster. The mail kept getting mixed up, and so they just decided to name it after the postmaster. Actually, my dad became the postmaster. So I'm the child of the epitome of a minor bureaucrat, the postmaster of a third-class post office. And I always thought he earned a very honorable living, by the way. But the unique thing about Carville was it was, I said if there's 1,000 people at it, 550 would be poor blacks and 400 would be people with leprosy. And I hear people talk about marginalized people. That's all I ever grew up around. I mean, you know, people that were on shadows of society and opportunity. And I think that kind of experience, and I think the film did a pretty good job of showing how you get shaped by conditions that your life. And David, you're right. I didn't become successful until I was 42. And I'm not sure that's, I didn't like it. I didn't like being unsuccessful. I didn't like being broke. I didn't like borrowing money from my friends or waiting for people to buy me a drink. But I learned a lot. Sometimes, you know, in the desert, you learn a lot when you're wandering around. You pick up a tip or two. But that's
Well, let me ask you a question about Carville, which is at what? It's a short distance away from Baton Rouge.
It's about 20 miles south of
Right.
LSU football stadium, yes.
How, just to locate it at a sacred point there, the LSU football stadium, you must follow election returns from Carville. How did the Democratic ticket do this year?
90%. I mean,
It was kind of a rhetorical question.
Yeah. No,
But I mean,
right.
what is it that, I'm sure that wasn't the case when you were a kid,
When I was a kid, black people couldn't vote.
but the town probably still was more Democratic, right?
Yeah, yes.
Everybody was Democrat.
Actually, my parents were Democrats, which was kind of, not saying rare, but they were, even during civil rights, they were Democrats.
I guess what I'm driving at, because I want to mix the contemporary and then we'll get back to your career. What is it that is making communities like Carville vote 90% for Donald Trump?
Well, no, they didn't. Carville's 90% Democratic. Carville's almost exclusively black. Okay, so it's
I
a little
see,
bit
I
of
see, I see. Okay, take other
bit,
communities, this
Right.
month, other communities.
Places really adjacent to it.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorrento, Louisiana would be a good example, or Santa Monica, Louisiana, or something like but look, some of it, don't discount that some of it is racism, okay? But not all, not all. That's an easy way out. And the Democrats have become over the years, have lapsed into being an urban educated party that has come to overly reflect the values of urban educated people. And sometimes those values are not in accord, or we come across as kind of culturally condescending, or we come across as like, hey, we're part of the cool people. And over a period of time, there's a reaction to that among people. Like, anybody that does it, which Liz, you do all the time, and David, you used to do, if you listen to people in a focus group, they think we're kind of detached and kind of culturally disrespectful of their lives.
Now, Liz, I totally agree with this.
I do too.
And, I think one of the challenges for the Democratic Party is it still considers itself the party of working people, but it approaches working people like missionaries, like anthropologists. And the message is, we're here to help you become more like us. And people, there's a maybe unintended disdain in that, but people certainly feel it, lack of respect. You seek out candidates who understand that, but talk about how big a barrier that is, because one of the things we were talking about is Democrats are counting on Trump to screw up, and he looks like he's going to cooperate.
Yeah.
But it doesn't solve that problem.
Yeah, and one of my greatest fears here is that Trump screws up, Democrats do well in 2025, 2026, and everyone's like, well, everything's fixed, everything's great. But what I've really seen the last few years, I worked with candidates all across the country. People like, I worked for Tom Suozzi in his special in New York's 3rd District. People like Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez in Southwest Washington. And the people who have succeeded and generally been able to overperform, the people who've won in Trump districts, are people who actually listen to the voters, who meet them where they are, who when a voter says, you know what, things are too expensive and you guys aren't doing a damn thing for me, they come back and say, okay, well, this is what I want to do for you. When someone complains about the border, they don't respond and say, you know what, that's just a Fox News talking point. Well, actually, there isn't some massive influx. When people complain about public safety, crime, disorder, they don't just, get dismissed as, oh, that's just a right-wing talking point. And I do see that as a big problem in the Democratic Party, which is that we're not listening to people, and we dismiss their concerns, and we're not meeting them where they are. And what we've got to do is fundamentally get back to that. And that means that we're going to be pissing off some people in our coalition.
You might be pissing some people off?
Yeah, pissing off some people in our tent, right? And you know what? I'm sorry, but it's not controversial to say we need a secure border. It's not controversial to say we need safe streets, we need police, we need to prosecute crime, we need to punish criminals. And, but there are people in our coalition who think that way. And when we cede ground to those people, I do think it comes across as we're not listening to voters, it comes across that we know better than these voters, and why then would people vote for us?
Yeah, I think it's even deeper than that. It's that what you do and who you are is less important than what we do and who we are.
Yeah.
Except when we have a pandemic, and then those of us who are fortunate enough to make our living in front of a computer can go on with our lives. And then there are people who actually make the country go, and they had to go out, and they had to work. And we call them essential workers until the pandemic ends, and then they kind of fade into the woodwork again. But yeah, there may be people who disagree with that analysis, and you will have time to ask questions, but only if I move this program along.
Right.
So I want to see this clip from the documentary. This is about that point in James's career. He had just run, and I know this because I was running Paul Simon's campaign for the Senate here in the same year. He had run the greatest losing campaign in the history of American politics for Lloyd Doggett, who was running for the Senate in Texas. And in that campaign was not just Carville, but his buddy Paul Begala, Mark McKinnon, who ended up being a noteworthy consultant ultimately in both parties, Kiki Moore and others. It was a font of talent. And in our campaign, Rahm Emanuel and a whole bunch of other people. So those two campaigns produced a lot of talent for a lot of years. But he lost, and then he got, you'll see what happened from there.
And he just wasn't sure he was ever going to really make it.
He slept on my sofa at age 40. Absolutely broke. He had an Oldsmobile. He had 3 or 4 changes of clothes. And that was it.
So I go back to Baton Rouge, work in the mayor's office.
We'll also be proposing some new school lights at school crossings to ensure the safety of our children. The mayor feels very strongly about this.
Then I get a call to go interview for a campaign in Philadelphia. And I said, well, you got to send me the ticket. And he said, well, we're going to reimburse you. I mean, we're not, just get, I said, you don't understand.
I don't have the money to get a ticket. You got to send me the money to get the ticket to go to Philadelphia.
Took a job in 1986 working for a man named Bob Casey, who was then running for governor of Pennsylvania.
This is Pennsylvania in '86, when the worst of the Rust Belt collapse is going on. Casey would go around that state, spurred on by Carville, and Casey would go around and said, if you've ever been knocked on your butt, I know what it feels like. I've been there. I'm gonna fight for you.
Okay, here we go, this way.
James understands the struggle that people have to put two paychecks together because he lived it.
Casey wound up winning. When the results came in and we won, James got on the phone and called Miss Nippy and just burst into tears. And Mr. Casey, who was a very reserved Irish Catholic, took the phone and told that lady how wonderful her son was. They had a vigorous agreement about how wonderful James is.
Miss Nippy being James's mom. So before I go on here, because you went on a big winning streak after that, you made up very quickly for the length of time it took for you to win one, and you went on a big winning streak. But I want to take a moment to just, this notion of the Rust Belt, which Pennsylvania was part of the industrial belt, the issues that you exploited in that campaign, they resonate in today's politics. And what you see, I mean, you see Trump proposing these tariffs. I think they could be catastrophic, but they also speak to something, which is that there are a lot of people in those communities that were decimated, not just by globalization, but automation and the changing economy, who feel like they were betrayed. And so the question is, what do you say to those people? And James, you helped, well, go ahead, just why don't you give forth on that?
Well, what I'll say is we're not going to carry Washington County, Greene County, Pennsylvania for a long time. But we do a project where we said we have to lose by less. So the difference between losing 82 to 18 or losing 73 to 27 is all the difference in the world. All right, it's all the difference in the world. Sometimes you...
This is why James experimented with losing, so he could figure out what the formula was.
The bad math in my head. And it's, you know, Democrats have become, not all, but a lot of what I call the NPR. They love preening and talking about how moral they are and how they have to exist in this corrupt, misogynistic, racist, backward-looking, uneducated, you know, tobacco-chewing company. And people rebel against that. That's not the way that you get some of these people back. We do better with younger people in these areas. We do better with females than we do with males. But we can do a lot better. And if you talk to, like, Senator Lis Smith or Rubin, they'll tell you the hardest thing they had to overcome was a D after their name.
Yeah.
Okay, that was the one thing that they had to. We have created a party for people to run from, not to run on. And this is something I'm very big on. You know how you see Elizabeth Smith, Illinois. The most relevant point is the partisan lean of the district. Because when somebody is in a plus 25 Democratic district and they're popping their mouth off, they're not helping the people that we're going to win with in the plus or minus 4 districts. All right? Mm-hmm. They're just, you know, when I see these urban Democrats, we've got to get out there and we've got to do this and we got to do that. And, well, calm down a little bit. We got to elect people in Pennsylvania. We got to elect people in Michigan. We got to elect people in Georgia. We got to elect people in North Carolina. And people encourage that, and they send them a lot of money overnight. They're not helping you.
This
They're not helping you.
It is true. It is true that the Republicans have their own version of this.
Terrible.
So they've got to deal. They've got to deal with that. But Liz, Joe Biden, in winning in 2020, lost 83% of the counties in this country. In losing in 2024, Democrats lost 90% of the counties in this country. I wasn't a math major when I attended the University of Chicago, but I don't think you need to be. That's bad.
That's bad.
Yeah.
That's bad. And just to piggyback off something James said, if you look at some of the top overperformers from last cycle, whether it's Pat Ryan in the Hudson Valley, Angie Craig in Minnesota, Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez, Southwest Washington, Jared Golden in Maine, people like that, they won not by leaning into the Democratic brand. They won by running against the Democratic brand. And when your brand is so deep in the toilet that is the only path to victory, there is no way for us to build a majority, let alone a sustainable majority. We do have these atomized cases of people who are able to succeed by running against the brand, but we really do need to figure out, I think, as a party, how we get to a place where the D around your neck isn't instantly a millstone around your neck, in a place like Iowa, which is a state that Barack Obama won twice, or a place like Ohio, a state that Barack Obama won twice.
Yeah. In fact, Barack Obama wouldn't have been president without Iowa, because in the Democratic caucuses, he won a state that was 90% white.
And so part of it, I think, is we've got to think, obviously, about the message. We've got to think about the leaders that we're putting out there. We've got to think about the candidates we're recruiting, too. And one thing that we're seeing is that when you recruit candidates who aren't just like career politicians who've been in office forever, marinating politics, people who maybe own an auto shop, people who were veterans, people who were nurses, teachers, et cetera, that they tend to overperform because they have less of that sort of stench of politics on them. But this is going to be a multi-year project. Democrats have done this before. I mean, you guys were around when Democrats did this in the 80s and 90s. But I think we need that sort of level of a project right now, because it's not sustainable for the path to victory for Democrats in so many places of the country to just run against the party.
That is a multi-year project, but we got a multi-minute thing here, so I got to keep going.
Right.
The next clip is after you won in Pennsylvania. Bob Casey lost 3 races for governor. This was the 4th that he ran.
Right.
So when he went around saying, "I know what it's like to be knocked down," people knew what he was talking about.
3 times lost from Holy Cross. That was his name.
And then you won and you helped elect a guy named Frank Lautenberg in New Jersey to the Senate. And then in 1991, you won a race that was a bellwether race, a special election in Pennsylvania again for an appointed senator against a former governor and Republican attorney general. I think you started 106 points behind in that race. And it was seen, and healthcare became the issue in that campaign that you helped orchestrate and conceive. And then a guy named Bill Clinton, who was thinking of running for president since birth, hired you. And let's take a look at what Bill Clinton had to say about James Carville.
You just talk to everybody, including members of the press, and run your campaign. So I had something to learn, I knew, and I was very impressed with what he'd done. When I met Carville, I thought I was home. We were 2 guys with pretty flashy and strong-willed mothers who came from little southern towns, and I thought he was so smart.
Clinton and Carville are from roughly the same generation, roughly the same kind of socioeconomic background, and they both had a little bit of rogue in them. When Clinton signed on Carville and Begala, it was a sign that this is someone who is serious, and this is someone who is coming to play and coming to win.
And so, and related to that, you reached a moment in that campaign, and there are a couple of people here with gray hair, and I'm sure you remember this. You know who you are. If you don't, ask your neighbor. Where a letter surfaced in which Bill Clinton was talking to the person at their draft board and explaining why he couldn't serve and his moral objection. So, and this became a huge issue, and the conventional wisdom was this would take Bill Clinton down. So that's the predicate to this particular clip.
James knew his generation's ambivalence. He knew how people felt who had served and who had decided not to serve. He looked at the letter in a totally different way than anyone else. That's so James, to see opportunity at a moment when everybody else sees death.
Carville recommended that we turn into it, that we deal with it.
Why did the Pentagon, in your opinion, release the letter?
I think that it is, why do you think that? Well, let's try a case of rocket science. Here's an article in the Wall Street Journal on Friday, and here's a story that looks like it might be going away. And somebody says, aha, look, we have something that can kick this story an extra day.
My job was to convey to the press and the public that we are tough fucking people that know what they're doing. Because that was really part of what I was selling.
But you have to ask, are you going to let me answer the question? Or are you going to interrupt me? Okay? All right.
That defiance ended up sending a bigger signal that lasted throughout the whole campaign. If you've got a big problem, confront it, don't hide it.
Carville's approach is just as relevant, perhaps more relevant today than it was in 1992. You turn into the fire, you don't turn away from it.
This seems pretty topical. James, I got to ask you, you wrote a piece in the New York Times that got a lot of commentary, and that Democrats need to step back and allow Trump to destroy himself. That was interpreted as retreat.
Well.
So on the part of a lot of activist Democrats. Explain yourself.
Thank you. Very good. I think it's worked out. It was 70 days. Trump dominated everything. Great. All right. And then on the 71st day, it went to shit. All right. So you talk about, you know how we won the Revolutionary War? George Washington retreated from Long Island. You know where he retreated to? Valley Forge. You know what happened after Valley Forge? Trenton. You know what happened on the first day of Gettysburg? Buford pulled back. He retreated to the higher ground. So when you study history, you study the fish hook. It was won on the first day. The reason you had Pickett's charge was because Buford pulled back to Cemetery Ridge. And
James was actually there, by the way.
Yeah, I remember it. I remember Walt Whitman and I were shooting the shit, you know. But my point is, sometimes you have to let them in. And now they're in. And now, you know, we're in a much better place. But if you, in one of the things we'll say, so Schumer got a ration of crap for his vote. Actually, I think that it may prove to be smart. And I'll tell you why, David, because you and I, this thing is careening towards some kind of a shutdown, a debt default. There's some kind of, it's not very hard to see that there's some bad stuff coming. So you'll be able to go on CNN and say, look, the Democrats did everything they can to help. I mean, Chuck Schumer took all kind of unbelievable heat to try to work with them, and and then now by letting them in and giving up a little ground in February, you're going to get the high ground come July. Politics is not won in March or April of an odd number year. All right? And the party, the definition of party, we all agree, is terrible. We ought to use this opportunity to build our image as the kind of party that fights for people. I always say, we want to be the party of the people that are trying to make it, not the people that have it made.
So everybody here is trying to make it in one sense or another. You're in college, you're studying, you want to go to grad school, you want to get a job, you want to do something, you're on the make. And Democrats should make it feel like, hey, they're for you. And the one thing that really pissed me off about Democratic messaging is we would tell people how good everything was. And young people are like, what's that son of a bitch talking about?
Yeah.
I can't buy a house. I can't borrow money. I can't educate children. I don't, we had this kind of generational thing, and we lost a lot of young people because we didn't see them. Seeing people and telling people, I see you and I see your problems, that goes a long way. Even if you can't solve it, the fact that they see you is important. Or they know that you have a problem buying a house. They know you have a problem borrowing money. You know they have a problem paying student loans back. Just to know they see you is critical.
On the Schumer issue, I kind of agree that Schumer, he did the right thing in the worst possible way.
Oh, yeah.
Worst possible way.
But Liz, there's a bit of a trap because there is an impulse to react to everything that Trump does and create an impression that you're there to preserve the status quo.
Yeah.
And there is a trap now that he is tearing everything down, that all you need to do is just restore everything to where it was. And isn't there a need for Democrats to say, we are about renewal. We're not about restoration. We're about something new that's going to be better, more responsive, less corrupt.
Yeah, like the status quo is broken, and voters were like screaming from the rooftops telling us this in 2024. And when they said, I can't afford things, my life is harder than it used to be, I am doing everything right, I am doing everything I was told to do. And I can't own a home. I can't raise a family on this income. I forget going on a nice vacation, any of these things. And our response is, well, actually, the GDP is so high. Well, actually, Bidenomics is making your life so much better. And it's the height of arrogance. And sometimes as Democrats, we become the party of, well, actually. And we tell people things that just aren't true. I think I said this the last time I was here. And voters are just telling us, stop pissing on my leg and telling me it's raining. And that's what we do. And it frustrates me to no end. And so, yes, we cannot be the party of the status quo. We cannot be the party of the restoration. That doesn't mean that we go out and do what Trump is doing and blow things up. That doesn't mean that we make fake promises that if we do these tariffs, we can turn back the clock and all these same jobs that were there 50 years ago will magically come back. But what we need to do is have a counter, have an alternative to MAGA. And I think that has got to be creating a vision of a new American dream for people and a future that they can see themselves in, where if they do the things, if they work hard, if they do all the things that they're supposed to do, that they can own a home, they can have a cabin up north or on the lake, that they can have kids that go to good schools and safe communities. And until we sort of provide that affirmative vision and don't just impugn voters who express concerns and don't just react negatively to everything Donald Trump says, I think we're really, really, really going to struggle. Because at least he's offering them something.
Well,
we need to offer a little more.
I personally think Trump has benefited from following Biden. The message of the Trump campaign was the world is out of control and Biden's not in command. Mm-hmm. And so in the front end, in those 70 days that James talked about, you saw a lot of action, right. and at 20,000 feet, fighting waste, fraud, and abuse and efficiency is a very compelling message. It's when you get closer to the ground and the Social Security office in your town closes down that it becomes something else. But I was in Washington. There is plenty of stuff that should be thought through and made more efficient. It's just not with a chainsaw.
But
But let me,
I want to address one thing. So Trump's first 70 days, he was everywhere. It was action. He was doing
Right.
He looked strong. Okay, he looked like he was in charge. And now that the economy is going in the crapper, and it's going in the crapper, you know, it's particularly going in the crapper relative where it was, people are going to say, well, he could have done something if he wanted to. He was a strong leader.
Yeah, it's hard to be.
He's not going to be able, he's not viewed as a bystander.
this is where being in charge isn't going to pay off.
Yes, this is where letting him have 70 days of dominance is going to haunt him, because you are in control of everything. Cory Booker asked a great question. It's early, but are you better off today than you were on January 20th? The answer is you're not. Somebody said the two pronouns of my brokerage account are was and were.
So one of the things that I'm glad you guys can laugh. I guess you haven't checked your accounts. One of the things that is sort of emblematic of the times in which we live, and I think social media has done a lot to make this worse, is just how fundamentally we're driven into our silos, and everybody outside the silo is not just someone with a different point of view or a different background, but alien, threatening, dangerous. But you experienced sort of the leading edge of this. I want to look at this clip about your very famous marriage.
There was a romantic sentiment about us initially. Then it turned into, today, we are some sort of prescription for bipartisan civility. Like, we do not have bipartisan civility. We have marital civility. We have bipartisan cacophony.
We've been married 32 years. People can infer what they want or don't want from it. It's all how central were your politics to you. There are tens of millions of people in the United States that don't even know anybody from another party.
It never occurred to me that your love interest in politics would be a determinant in a relationship. But a majority of people don't want to date somebody from the other party. So a majority of people just want to think like they think and be validated 24/7. Well, I think that's sorrowful. I don't have to agree with him, but he makes me think. There is not a day that goes by that I don't hear something new from him or laugh at some weird thing that he thinks is funny.
Look, be curious.
He's just lives in his own world, and I love that. He's just a wonder. He's like a wonder of nature. But so is a hurricane. So sometimes you just have to batten up the hatches and get a stiff martini and let the hurricane pass by.
The great Mary Madeline, and if you listen closely to her voice, it sounds very much like Calumet City.
If you look up, somebody put Thornton Fractional North High School and see how far we are from it.
Yes.
That's where she went to high school.
Yeah.
In south side of Chicago, Calumet City. So I bet you it's no more than a mile and a half south of here.
Yeah, yeah. Liz, it is true. I mean, you look at these polls and it's amazing the number of people say, well, I don't really have Republican friends. I certainly don't want my child to marry one. And the same is true the other way. I mean, the numbers are almost comparable. And it is a measure of something dramatically, in my view, dramatically weird and off.
Weird and broken, and you now see this phenomenon where not only are people, do they virtue signal about, oh, I won't talk to my, Trump voting friend anymore or family, but you have these people who now are like, don't want to associate with people who have Trump voting friends, family. You have segments on cable TV of psychiatrists talking you through how to get through Thanksgiving dinner with your family member that has an opposing political view. Look, I think that's pretty sick. I think it's pretty broken. And I think as someone who works in politics, right, I am so much better at my job because I have friends, because I have family members who either are non-voters or are Trump voters. And like fundamentally, like I don't think who you vote for makes you a good or bad person. And the siloing off of like Republicans only talking to Republicans, Democrats only talking to Democrats, like is really unhealthy for, our political system, and I think it's contributing a lot to the polarization. And I love the dynamic between James and Mary, and like I would love to get back to a world where that sort of thing is not only not looked down upon, but encouraged. And like that whole culture of being able to talk to people from the opposite side of the aisle, it's just like, it's going everywhere. It's going in Washington, it's going in state capitals, and that is a big problem.
So one of the things I tell people, Woody Allen famously said, the good thing about being bisexual, it doubles your chance to get a date. I thought about it, but I couldn't get there. But the good thing about dating Republicans, it doubles your chance of getting a date. And if you look like me, you got to play the percentages, man.
James, how did this, first of all, I'd be interested, before I proclaim your marriage as a model for bipartisan, I want to see all the outtakes of this documentary here. But tell me how this documentary came about.
Thank you. So Susan McHugh was Senator Harry Reid's chief of staff when she was 30 years old. This was like 3 or 4 years post the start of the pandemic. And she's a kind of friend of Mary and I, a friend of mine, know Susan well. She said, I was a student at Rutgers, and I saw the War Room, and I got so fired up about getting into politics.
You guys seen that
I had
documentary, The War Room,
successful
about the 92 campaign?
Career, and I want to do a movie about another movie about you, and this movie was made for you. That was the origin of the movie, that we wanted to make that the business of politics had become held in such disrepute, and that people wouldn't want to do it. Young people would say that. This movie was actually made for the people in this audience. And it was Susan's idea that we got to try to get people to think, when you look at the movie, you say, well, those people had a pretty good time. They weren't, they looked like they were having fun and doing things. And that was the real, and we raised $2.5 million, all from friends of mine. We said we wanted to do this movie. We wanted to try to get young people more engaged in politics. We thought that the whole profession, the idea had fallen into disrepute. And that's why it was made. That was the origin. And then she called Matt. Marcia Hale asked her, and Marcia Hale said, well, you got to call Matt Tynhauer. Marcia Hale's one of these great Washington connectors. And she said, could you recommend a director for this? And Matt says, yeah, me. And so you got to be a pretty gutsy director to take on a subject that was, a kind of legendary political film before and do another. And Matt was a really hot documentarian, as you can tell. He was like first-class documentary filmmaker. And he was just a terrific guy to work with. Susan was just terrific. John Max is one of my best friends, probably one of the most prolific writers, comedy writers in the country. And it was just a dream project. It was no dissent. It was no... and Mary and I saw the movie for the first time at Telluride. We actually saw it at the film festival. And I said, I don't want to see that shit, because if you start, you get 5 people with an IQ of 200 equals an IQ of 100. Okay, 1 person with an IQ of 130 is smarter than 5 people with an IQ of 200, because once you get a committee in there,
Here at the University of Chicago, there may be people with 200 IQ
here, but
who are going to be really pissed.
And can I just say something really quickly? And I have to say this, is I was 10 years old when the 92 campaign was going on. And I followed it actually pretty closely. And while everyone in America is falling in love with Bill Clinton, I fell in love with James Carville. Now, I watched The War Room, and I think it was in 5th grade. You're asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? People say president, fireman, ballet, a ballerina, President of the United States, I said, I want to be James Carville. And
were your parents really terrified about this?
you know what? I think they were sort of intrigued, right? And that's how, watching the War Room made me feel. But watching this latest documentary, I felt that tingle again. And there's something about James that we need more of in politics, like people who are hard-nosed, realists, all of that. But at their core, there is this belief. There is this faith, and there's this desire to change things for the better, and understanding that the only way you can do that is by getting involved in politics and winning elections. So I am now pinching myself that I'm on stage.
There is there is online, I'm sure, a picture of little 9-year-old Lis Smith in her LSU sweatshirt.
She loves Joe Barr.
I got to ask you, before we go to questions, you created a bit of a kerfluffle. I may have had a little of a piece of this as well, but around the 2024 campaign and around whether it was advisable for the president to run, and let's take a look at that.
I have become the kind of person that I used to hate. One of these carping Democrats. They're never goddamn satisfied. There was a CBS poll where 72% of the people said that President Biden physically or cognitively can't do the job. And by the way, he is old. Age is something that everybody deals with. If you're like me, you're dealing with it as we speak. If you're a younger person, you deal with it through your parents or your grandparents or somebody down the street. You can't pivot from that.
Mr. President, Mr. President, on your right, Mr. President.
I've heard James on the phone saying, what if I stop saying he's old, he's gonna get younger? I mean, it's not gonna... And I'm very pro-age. I love that James is gonna be 80 and still whippersnapping around, but he quits teaching at LSU because it was too hard to drive to Baton Rouge. Imagine being president at that age.
I am very comfortable that I am saying publicly what people are saying to themselves. I have enough money. I have enough whatever. I could just shut the fuck up.
James is nothing if not consistent. He's consistent in his boldness, consistent in his willingness to say things that his allies might not want to hear. James is saying, the flames are coming out of the engine, the plane is going down, and we're all just watching it happen.
Honestly, can you shut the fuck up?
David, you very much shared my view. We have an advantage that most people don't. I myself am aged. You're getting there.
Yes.
And we both have some idea, you're a little bit better than me, of what that job entails.
Yeah.
That's not a job for an 80-year-old.
Yeah.
Let me tell you right now. That's not, you don't want somebody of that age. I don't care how good medicine is or how far advanced we are. That's not a job for an 80-year-old.
Yeah.
And I just knew that deep down inside. Thank God people like you also saw what was evident. And I just hope we never get ourselves in a situation like this again. And I hated doing it because I didn't dislike President Biden at all. We always had a cordial relationship with him. I kind of admired him as kind of state school guy, kind of tough things out, But it just wasn't going to work. And this whole catastrophe was made possible that he didn't get out until July 21st. And we would have done much better, but it's hard not to put significant blame on the fact that he stayed in the race for too goddamn long. When everybody in the world, you knew it. You could see it. You had grandparents, you had people, you grew up. You could see the guy was there's nothing wrong with being old. In fact, it's better than being dead. But if I can't drive to Baton Rouge and back every Tuesday night to do a 2-hour and 15-minute class, I sure in the hell can't be president. It's a lot harder. It's a lot harder to do that. So I give David, enormous credit. Other people, but they were calling me, and the Hollywood people were calling me, screaming at me, and shit. I said, look, they said, well, so-and-so wants to call you. I said, I'll talk to anybody. I just answer my phone, but I'm not going to change my mind. I mean, I'll be nice to you. I'll be civil. I said, appreciate it. Thank you. But I'm not, because I thought about it for a long time before I did it. I mean, I talked to a lot of people. I thought it through. And I just felt it was just something I had to do. I wish I'd have been a little more successful, and if it had gotten out early, I think.
Well, I want to ask about that in a second, but I want to tell you that there's a microphone there, so if you have questions, line up behind that microphone. We're going to prioritize students, as we always do. So for the young at heart, don't be disheartened if you don't get to ask one. I said from the beginning.
Yeah, do me a favor, just kind of identify yourself and where you're from. I'm just
wait, before you go, 2022, I started talking about this, and I said, this isn't a political judgment, this is an actuarial judgment.
Yeah.
I mean, I had the office next to the president, I know the job, and, I mean, like you, I had a great relationship with Vice President Biden,
right.
Worked very closely with him. But Liz, real quick, would Democrats have won the election if there had been a primary election, if the president had gotten out, would history have been different?
Yeah, I mean, if we'd nominated the right candidate.
Okay, well, I see you're a political person too.
Well, no, we would have had a better chance, absolutely. Yeah. And we would have had a fighting chance, but a lot of the names I saw out there weren't exactly, I think, people who would necessarily have been the strongest contenders, but it was a massive calculation that he didn't get out. And also, a fascinating thing to me about all of this was that, the people who, you would have thought it was the young people who would be saying, get out, you're too old. But it was if you actually look at it, the dead enders were people like Jasmine Crockett, like AOC, while people like David and James were out there saying he's got to go. And I think part of it is because you understand the limitations of age. Alternative scenario, do I think we would have won? I can't definitively say, but we would have had a better shot.
Yeah.
And because we wouldn't have had to defend the Biden record necessarily.
Well, and he, I think, wouldn't have necessarily behaved the same way.
Right.
So anyway, let's go to questions, and I'm going to reserve a little time at the end because I have one more clip from this documentary that I think is a great benediction for this whole discussion. And since we're in a chapel, it's appropriate. So go ahead.
Thank you all for being here tonight. My name is Gil. I'm a first year in the college, and I'm from the Bay Area in California. Right. It seems like the Democrats have largely lost the culture wars. I'm curious if you guys can speak to what Democratic politicians on the national stage should be doing.
I kind of disagree. I don't think we lost the culture wars. I mean, if abortion is part of the culture war, we had nothing. What we did was something really stupid by embracing identity politics. And what identity politics asked me to do, that which I can't, it asked me to look at your identity ahead of your humanity. I can't do that. I can't, first I got to see you as a human being, then I'll see you as something else. And it adopted the one thing that we couldn't do. It was coded language that came out of some idiot faculty lounge, could have been here, but probably possible. I mean, you would definitely be one of the suspects. And it wasn't how people talked. If I went to New Orleans, and I saw 3 black guys, and I walked up to them and I said, hey, fellas, how are things in the community of color today? They said, what's this son of a bitch talking about? Okay? I mean, the people don't, like Ruben Gallego would never let his staff use the term Latinx.
Latinx, yeah. Because it sounds like a laxative, first of all.
Yeah, it was like I say, it was some idiot, overeducated too much time on their hands, faculty member that came up with this. The first time, I don't like using the word, but I'll use it. The first time that woke was ever recorded used was by a guy named Leadbelly Ledbetter, who was a black musician who was actually born right outside of Shreveport. He died in Houston, he was in jail. And it was that black people in like Texas and Louisiana should be aware of their interactions with police. You should be, when the police pull you over, you need to be woke. That's a pretty good idea. But then overeducated white people got a hold to it and screwed it up for everybody else. They took a very noble word with a very noble origin and ruined the Democratic Party in the process.
Real quick, because we got to get to other questions.
Yeah, I think we lost the battle in 2024, and I would point to, there was this really big miscalculation on the Harris campaign's part. You know, when Trump was running those ads, Kamala's for they, them, Trump's for you, we just didn't respond. And there was just a total vacuum. And we let the Republicans really define what Democrats stood for on these issues. And I saw some polling the other day that you would not believe. Like attitudes on issues related to transgender people have like gone back to pre-15 years ago. And on every single issue related to transgender issues, like the public is against where Democrats are, except for discrimination in housing and all of that. And I ascribe that in part to the fact that Democrats have been unwilling to just state some basic things, state where they stand on it, and have just let the Republicans run roughshod on this. We got to bring back some common sense, got to say where we stand on these things, and we can't just let the Republicans define the conversation.
Yes, next question.
Hi guys, thank you so much for being here. I'm Alex, I'm a second-year PhD student in the political economy program here. My question was, after the Harris loss, The Atlantic ran an article that basically made the claim that there were two candidates in the last 30 years who ran for president and won people in the bottom half of the income distribution and people who lack a college degree at greater rates than the top half of the distribution and college-educated people. And those people were Bill Clinton in 1996 and Trump in 2024. The only two people in the other side of that corner who won rich people and educated people were Bob Dole in 1996 and Harris in 2024. My question is, what are the issues that Democrats can run on, that they can change this gist that people have publicly, where, frankly, the Democratic Party has become the party of the educated elite, and they're certainly funded by the educated elite, and yet these populistic claims that you guys are talking about are the things that really hit for people, whether they be in AOC's district or in Tom Swozey's or Marie's district. So my question is, what are the issues that we can run on that we can actually change the narrative on?
All right. So somebody asked me when I actually at UVA, the college we were here before I came here, what's the next new thing in politics? And my answer is nothing. Mm-hmm. There is no new thing in politics. So, you know, foreign affairs, a kind of great thing you buy in the airport, act like you're reading it, you're really not. They found a memo that Cicero's brother wrote, 50 BC, and they asked me to read it and commented on it. I read it and I said, we have thought of exactly nothing new. What was ever in that memo to Cicero in 50 BC, you could put that in the hands of any presidential candidate today, and it would be totally relevant. The first person to stand up.
You just put a lot of consultants out of business here.
Huh?
You just put a lot of consultants out of business.
Yeah, honestly, yeah. But the hardest thing to do, is to stay focused and to stay in, you do this all the time, and you do it all the time. You do a message box. Stay in this, stay right here. And as I always tell people, it's easy as falling off a log. I want you to stand on a log and fall off of it. You can't. It's hard. Simplicity is difficult. In political communications, is the only endeavor that you'll ever encounter where you multiply by subtracting. Well, you say, that doesn't make any sense, James. No. The less you say, the more you heard. The more you say, the less you heard. And we just got to remember that. And it's always going to be, they say, well, is it the economy stupid? So if you think of a day that you go through, how many economic interactions do you have? 100? You eat breakfast, you go buy this, you do this, you pay the tuition, you got dorm, you get the Uber, you just think of an normal time how many economic interactions a human being has. That's going to really affect the way that you think of things.
Next question.
Oh, this is my lady from Ethiopia, right?
Hi, yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you all for coming out tonight. My name is Meg. I'm a master's student in the Committee of International Relations. And I had a question for you, Liz. Earlier on in the event, you talked about how Mr. Carville has been a long-time role model for you. And that got me thinking about just, I guess, maybe your experience in political campaigning and strategizing as a woman. I don't know if gender is like the biggest thing that has impacted like your experience in the field, but if it has been, I just wanted to hear more about it. And also if it hasn't been, then what would you say has been something that's really struck you?
Yeah, well, this is one of the reasons why I decided to write a book a couple years ago, Any Given Tuesday. And it was because, like, I'd read all these books about all these great men in politics, these great bios by people, autobiographies by people like, James Carville and David Axelrod, but I'd never really read one that had this sort of female experience in it, right? And so I wanted to, like, give that a voice. And what I would say is I think when I was younger and earlier on in my career, I noticed it maybe a little bit more, right? It's like, a lot of the men be like, okay, darling, I got shoes older than you, and, kiddo, like, let the men talk. I did get a lot of that. These days, not as much. And I think things have changed and continue to change. I think, I would love to see more women get involved in politics, but I don't think it's a barrier for anyone, and I really would encourage you to do it.
Let me just say, I've seen Liz in action, and she commands a room. The gender thing doesn't enter into it.
Yeah.
She can drop the F-bomb with the best of them when she
Yeah,
wants to get her point across.
Prolifically, but yeah, it's.
So I just took a picture because we're going to put it in the movie and then we send it to the donors because they'll love. We're at a packed house in Chicago because that's what the movie's about. So I wasn't trying to intrude on your privacy or be distracting, but I wanted to get the photo of this room.
Tell me you delivered the message to the faculty, club people. Next question, please.
Hi, thank you both for being here. I'm Will. I'm a third year in the college studying history and public policy. I just wanted to ask you guys both, you point to the idea that the Democratic Party needs to have like an affirmative message as opposed to just the party of, well, Trump is destroying this stuff, what if we protected it? And I wanted to ask what you guys thought that affirmative message could consist of. You talk about like renewal, not just restoration, but it can be hard to talk about some of those issues, especially around cost of living. You mentioned like the cost of student debt. When you try to get really, renewally about those, it can kind of scare some other moderates in the party. So I was kind of wondering what you think are the issues that you could build like that sort of like affirmative platform and brand for the Democratic Party on that aren't just moderating stances on some other issues to get back in line with the nation.
Well, I was the one who used the word, but you guys answer and then I'll.
So, I love what David said. I'm going to steal it because let me tell you something about this business. If you get into it, the patent on an idea is about 5 seconds. So you hear something in a meeting and it becomes part of, renewal, not restoration. We got to show something. Well, let me give you one idea. If they're going to cut taxes by $4 trillion of people with incomes over $400,000 a year, why does some gazillionaire in Winnetka need the money and not a student? So why don't we take that money and put it in a first-time home buyer's mortgage relief fund or rental assistance fund. And people say, well, that makes sense, all right? But if you so much of politics, one of the things that I believe is raise the minimum wage. Give people a raise. People don't make enough money. Right? So you say, well, I go to the University of Chicago, you know, the minimum wage is not going to be an issue in your life, but you're not opposed to somebody earning a goddamn living. You like that idea. And when you say that, it tells people that you see that when I say a politician says, we're going to take the money from all of this, we're going to help young people. When I went to LSU Law, I got to buy a house with no down payment at the lowest possible interest rate that could be offered. It was almost a government guaranteed loan. When I got $300 a month from the GI Bill. That's what it was, in $1971. I could do what I wanted with it. All right, but I didn't pay, I never knew anybody that had student debt. All right? That's all you know. But if you don't see the low-wage worker, or you don't see the young person, then guess what? Low-wage workers and young people didn't turn out. It was shitty turnout because we didn't see them. And, so maybe there's not an exact policy solution that, Democrats love that. We got to have a policy solution for left-handed, multiracial lesbians or something. I don't know what they come up with, right? But you can see people and you can see their problems in a broad sweep. And if people say that, then you'll say, okay, at least they get it,
I just, the thing that I would add is, when you look at the economic history of the last 4 decades, and we talked a little bit about this the other night when Scott Galloway was here, but almost all of the growth has been at the top of the economic ladder. And I'm not one who punishes, I don't think you should punish success. I also don't think it should be a closely held, privilege to be successful. And when 97.3% of the wealth is held by the top 50%, 2/3 by the top 10%, 14% by the top 1/10 of 1%, when people are, working people are struggling to make their grocery bills, their rent, to send their kids to college and so on, there is a systemic problem, and some of it is related to who has influence in Washington and how those policies are impacted. So we need to be bold, and I don't mean just Democrats, but we as a country need to think about, are we on a scheme, are we on a path that is sustainable? When people, during the campaign, when people said to me, why aren't these people worried about democracy as we are? Well, if you're sitting around a kitchen table and you're talking about democracy, it's probably because you don't have to worry about the cost of the food on the table. If you have to worry about the cost of the food on the table, that's going to be your principal concern. So I think that we need a system in which everybody feels like they're dealt in, and if they work hard, they can get ahead. And if we don't have that, you're going to have what we have. Now, in my view, Trump has wheeled a Trojan horse into Washington, a Trojan horse of populism in which a kleptocracy is contained. It's not going to help solve this problem. It's going to exacerbate the problem. But you need to say, well, what are you going to do? Big systemic things to make this thing work so that people can have confidence in democracy, confidence in capitalism. So with that, I'm getting the double super flashing red light here. Let me show you this last clip because I do think it sort of sums up what this is, why James Carville is James Carville and why I personally admire him so much.
This country is worth fighting for.
the principle of the generational promise is worth fulfilling. And I am not going to let anybody say, at a time that our basic institutions, our basic philosophy, our sense of decency and our sense of national purpose is under attack, that I sat by and did nothing more than pull a lever. That's your choice. I think I know what you're going to do. I know that you people and people like you around this country want to not just fight back, but you want to fight for something. You want to fight for this nation. You want to fight for its people. You want to fight for its children. But most importantly, you want to fight for its future. We have big battles coming up. I'm going to count on you. Thank you.
There's nothing more to add other than to thank Lis Smith and the great James Carville for being here tonight.